Okay. So this is CJ335 Defensive Tactics. And my name is Charlie Pappard. I think I know everybody. Or I've had you in some other class before. This class is different than most of the classes that we teach, mainly just because the emphasis is very much on hands-on practical, exercises more than any other class, including like the forensic science class and things like that. There is an academic component to this class, meaning that, you're going to learn some things. Some of the things that they include in the academic part of this, I think, are kind of not needed, but I don't get to pick and choose. I have to teach you, certain things because you're required to pass a written exam. The three components that you need in order to get a professional training certificate for PPCT is one, that you attend every minute of the training, meaning that if you're absent, you have to make it up. Two is that you pass a written exam, and three is that you are able to, by the end of the class, demonstrate the appropriate techniques. So, yeah, I'm not going to write the board. So what we are actually learning is a system called PPCT, that stands for Pressure Point Control Tactics. It is a research-based system about kind of how to manipulate body mechanics to your advantage. That's essentially what it is. There's a lot of jujitsu, but there's some other martial arts kind of thing incorporated into it. You're not going to be Walker, Texas Ranger or whatever, but it's about putting yourself in a position of advantage. That's really the common theme throughout the whole class, is that doing things that give you the advantage over your adversary. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're fighting an NFL linebacker or an MMA fighter or something like that, that doesn't mean you're going to win, but it does mean that you're going to give yourself the best chance of winning, I guess, that you can get. And so this curriculum is the mandated curriculum that has to be taught in Missouri police academies. I believe there's a bunch of other states that are also teaching it. I don't know which ones, but having this certification, if you plan to go into any of the criminal justice fields where you might deal with combative subjects, it's beneficial for you to have this background. If you go to a police academy, you'll get it again. But having been through it before, every time you kind of go through this kind of training, it's kind of like riding a bike or anything else like that. The more often you practice it, the better you're going to get. So there is that. Because this is a professional training class that is included in the college class here, there are some expectations that might differ from other classes, meaning that every minute that we are in the classroom or every minute that we are in the gym has to be made up if you miss. Doesn't matter if it's approved or not, as far as, if you find yourself in the hospital for a week or whatever, then you owe me a week of makeups at some point before I can give you that certificate. So that being said, I've learned from past semesters, don't put off these makeups until the end of the semester. Because, inevitably I have one or two kids that, we're like 2 weeks from the end of the semester and they're like, oh, I think I have some stuff to make up. It's like, well, when did you miss, how many days? Well, I don't know. and then I have to go try to freaking figure out what this kid owes me. So if you miss a day, obviously communicate it just like any other class, but also try to schedule a makeup within a week or so of missing that away. It's fresh in your mind what day you missed, and I can figure out what actually you need to do to make up and that kind of stuff. It is important. It's kind of difficult to kind of make this kind of class a normal college credit kind of a class, because when we teach it for continuing ed, or when they teach it in the basic academy and stuff, it is pass fail. Everything is pass fail. You either do it or you don't. You either pass the test or you don't pass the test. You either can demonstrate the techniques or you can't demonstrate the techniques. And so figuring out what to award points for and what not to, and that kind of thing is difficult. The other thing too is that the class really is primarily about the certification. And so if you don't earn the certification, you really shouldn't pass the class. There are some limited exceptions that I'll talk about there, and that is everybody pretty able-bodied and able to participate in the class fully, right? There's nobody. How's your leg doing? Better. Yeah. You don't need to be able to necessarily, you just need to be able-bodied. That's really the best way to put it. You need to be able to do normal exertion kind of activities, or if you're playing a sport, like, whatever you would, you're not like, injured currently. But many of you are athletes, some of you just get injured on your own accord. And so if that happens during the course of the semester, don't freak out. I'm not going to fail you because you broke your leg during the semester or whatever. But like I said earlier, you owe me the time. If you can't do it, then you need to come back later when you can. So what I am willing to do with that kind of thing is if it's just like 2 or 3 weeks during the semester that you're down, then of course we can make it up. But if it's something that happens at the end of the semester or something that takes you longer to recover from, like my wife just had shoulder surgery, and that's like a 4 or 5 month recovery, So if it's something like that, I can give you an incomplete and we can work it out, next semester, and whatever. So I can work around a lot of things. If for some reason somebody becomes permanently disabled, it hasn't happened yet, but I've got a plan for it anyway. If for some reason you become permanently disabled where you will never be able to make it up, then of course I would give you credit for the class based on your academic performance, and so that's a special exception. But that being said, there are a lot of accommodations that can be made, and we can work through problems together. But I just wanted to mention that. This is an early class. I realize that sucks, but it kind of is what it is, as far as, if you don't think that you can handle getting here every day, then this might not be the best class for you. So I'm trying to think. We will, for the first 3 weeks or so, we will be meeting on Tuesdays in here to start working through this academic stuff. And then on Thursdays, we'll be in the gym and we'll start doing some of the fun hands-on things. And that's kind of how it's going to work until I get to a point where I've pretty much gone through the academic stuff, and then we'll be towards the end of the semester, we'll just always be in the gym. Unless I want to come down here and show you guys a video or something like that. There is, in about 4 weeks, mid-September, I'm going to be gone for a week. I'm actually going to a training in Illinois that's going to be, instead of just being a normal instructor, I'm going to be an instructor trainer for PPCP. That week, we will be doing classroom stuff online. won't be able to meet live or whatever, like they prefer that we do, you know, where you're like in a meeting or whatever. It'll be something I post, you know, online, and we'll just kind of go from there. Something else new this semester that I'm doing is I'm trying to, and actually all of my classes, put more focus on the report writing element of things, because it is, in talking to people like Chief Donnell and other folks, it is something that new recruits, it's the most common thing they struggle with, is actually writing a law enforcement report. So I think that there should be more emphasis on that. This class always did have a report writing element, but I'm trying to strengthen it a bit. And when you write a report for anything, really, what the purpose of that report is that you're documenting an encounter, you're documenting your actions, you're putting something down so that it's recorded, because our memories aren't what we think they are, and we can't always remember verbatim everything that we've done. And so, and other people need to be aware of it too, because everything we do in criminal justice, whether we're a cop, whether we're a corrections officer, whether we're a juvenile officer, or what have you, everything has the potential to be litigated, whether that's a criminal case against your bad guy, or whether they sue you saying that you did something improper, or whatever the case may be. That written account is important. You know, it's probably more important even than video, and we rely a lot more on video than we used to, but you still need the report. So what I'm going to do for that purpose, there's also something too. The last several times I've taught the class, you know, I've always liked watching videos and talking about things, because I think that's the best way for it to sink in when I drone on and on about principles like, you know, that you're using the least amount of force that's necessary to achieve your objective. You know, it's easy for your eyes to gloss over and be like, oh, okay, you know, but when you actually watch something and say, hey, what do you think about that, and talk about it, that's the best way, I think, to really let the lesson sink in. So what I'm going to do this semester is I'm going to post some videos online throughout the semester, and it'll be your assignment to basically go through and write a report like you're involved in it, you know. So like if you're either one of the officers involved in it or something like that. And then once we've completed that assignment, then you'll bring a paper copy of your draft to class, and we'll review it, and I'll at that time kind of go over the rubric of what's expected information that has to be in there, and you'll be able to look at it and be like, nope, didn't do that. Anyway, and then we'll turn it in for a grade. So that's kind of the process by which I want to do that. And then, of course, after we've done the assignment, we'll also, when we're doing that review, we'll also look at video and talk about other things like, did he do the right thing? Why or why not? Was there maybe a better way to handle that kind of stuff. So my initial plan, which might get revised as we go, is that about every couple of weeks, I'm going to have you guys writing a report, you know, on a different video. The other thing too is that by the end of the semester, you're going to end up doing an actual report based upon a scenario that you're involved in, like not just watching a video and pretending that you're the top. But at the symposium, which is always on the Monday of finals week, we will do basically a demonstration in a public forum. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to be. Last year it was in the gym. That really didn't work out very well. But basically you'll come in and you'll respond to maybe a bar fight or domestic or something like that, and you'll do something that will kind of be entertaining for people watching, and then we'll do your practical exam right then and there. The difficulty in this class is that in order for me to give you a PPCT certificate, I have to do an individual one-on-one thing where I grade you, where I watch you do the techniques, every single one of them. And that takes about 20 minutes, you know, per student. And if you add that up, it's more than the 2 hours that they allot for the final exam. So what we're going to do is on Monday of finals week, that symposium day, I will have blocks, 20-minute blocks of time scheduled throughout the day. And you'll sign up for, you and a partner will sign up for one of those blocks, and we'll do your final exam then. And that way, it allows me to spread it out, you know, so that I can actually do what's required. And it also, you know, they got really excited about it whenever I proposed the idea, because they're trying to get more people to come to the symposium. So it's something that might be entertaining for people to watch. You know, you throw somebody down on a mat. We actually bought like portable mats for that purpose. So, you know, it's going to be fun and exciting. And by that time, you'll know what you're doing. So it won't be intimidating. Unless maybe the performance aspect of it might be that. But I'm not going to grade you based on how you do that scenario. That's really just something to kind of kickstart it, and you know, might be entertaining for people to watch. And then we'll go to the actual part where it's like, okay, you know, now you can do the escort and the takedown and this and that. So that's kind of how it's going to work. Are there any questions right off the bat for any of that? So I'm not keeping you the whole time here today. I never do on day one, but this class is going to kind of move very quickly from now on. You know, most of the time we will use all of the time, and sometimes you might have to remind me what time it is, you know, at the end of the class, you know, especially if you have a class right after this. So that's fine. But this class, this particular class, the pressure point control tactics is a research-based system that is based on what works for the most amount of people, most of the time. That being said, it's not foolproof, you know. Is anybody double jointed? A little bit, okay. If you are double jointed, a lot of these techniques rely upon kind of putting stress on your tendons, basically, to kind of create a discomfort. And so if your joint works differently than most people, then you may not feel that pain and discomfort. That being said, it's still a control tactic. It just doesn't have the pain compliance aspect of it attached, and so it may be less effective on some people than others. So, and you'll notice that too when you watch use of force videos. A lot of times we'll see cops try something that doesn't work, you know, and maybe it doesn't work because they're not doing it right. That is a thing, but it also may not work just because sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, I have definitely done, you know, dealt with people that weren't feeling pain. And when you're dealing with people that don't feel pain, pain compliance isn't going to work because they're not in the moment. It's not resonating, it's not sinking in, that signal isn't getting to the brain. And so, you know, you'll see, you know, scenarios where cops are like just knee striking and doing things like that, and the person is just still, you know, not responding to that. So if you're doing something and it doesn't appear to be working, that's the time for you to adapt to something else. So, you know, if you're not able to get the arm bar after 2 attempts or whatever, then adapt, do something else, put them against the wall, do something else, you know, disengage and use your baton or your taser or something else like that. So a lot of this too is about kind of improvising, and there's not just one right way to do it. The principles at stake here is that you want to try to find the best balance of doing a technique that's going to help you achieve your lawful objective with the least amount of force. And that's subjective. You know, one man's excessive force is another man's, yeah, that was right, you know. So I do want to give you a little kind of demonstration of what I'm talking about. This is a technique-driven system, meaning that I'm not necessarily saying these are the only techniques right out there, or even necessarily that they're the best techniques in the world. It's a collection of basic techniques that, again, from a research standpoint, has been demonstrated to be the most useful and the most effective in the most amount of situations, right? Because it's the idea of this curriculum is it's supposed to be kind of a basic course. So there are definitely other systems out there that are either adding to and this or supplementing this, especially when we're talking about the higher levels of resistance. So really the most significant degree that we get to in this class would be the cons. And we do not, PPCT does not have the best baton course. ASP or Monadnock are going to be the ones that most departments are using for that curriculum. That being said, it's not a waste of time to do this part of the class. It's just that there are other techniques and things that we aren't teaching you that other systems are, if that makes sense. So when you're talking about a technique-driven system, there are ways that you can mess that up and get the technique wrong, either subtly or significantly. So for example, is everybody right-handed? Is anybody left-handed? You're lefty? Okay. So when I say left hand, that means right for you. I guess it really doesn't matter, but your non-dominant hand, we'll just put it this way, which for most of us is our left hand. I want you to put it in front of you, palm up, with your elbow kind of bent. Okay, I want you to take your right hand, and I want you to come around like a joystick. Your joystick's still a thing for video games, not so much, I don't know. Anyway, grab your thumb, like this. And then what I want you to do is use the thumb as kind of a lever to bend that wrist kind of up and towards the elbow joint. But I want the thumb to kind of take the lead in that, if that makes sense. And there should be some degree of discomfort when you do that. If not, you need to torque it a little bit more. But you're basically taking your thumb and you're trying to lay it down on their wrist, right there. And if you take it too far, you can tear the ulnar collateral ligament in your thumb, and I know that because I had surgery to tear that because it happened to me. Not because of something I did, it was in the midst of a struggle, but it got caught laid right back down here like this, and I put it back. So anyway, but it's discomfort, right? It's not damaging anything, unless, like I said, unless you take it too far. But you're not really permanently injuring them. Even. It's not going to bruise. It's not going to, it's something that is just giving their brain a signal. Basically, it's like that hurts, and if you let go, within a minute or two, they're going to recover from it. And so, but that's a technique, right? And so if you do it wrong, right, there's a million ways to do it wrong, right? You can do it wrong by either not taking that thumb towards the wrist, but instead trying to use the back of your hand to try to do a wrist lock on its own. That, if you're skilled, you may be able to pull that off. But for the most part, if you're doing just a wrist lock, you need both hands to do that. So let me see, just hold your hand palms up. So if I take his wrist, both hands, I can do a wrist lock without the thumb involved, and it can be effective because I can really, pressure and counter pressure, can be applied. If I'm trying to do that one-handed, I can kind of do it, but it's not going to be as effective. And that's what I'm talking about with technique, right? There's, certain badasses, right, that can do something wrong and still get the result they want. It's also possible if you have a significant size and strength advantage on your opponent, you may not have to do the technique correctly at all and still get the result because you're just bigger than them and you can muscle through it. But again, what we're after is doing what is going to give you the most advantage and then the least advantage. So there are a dozen or so techniques, big major techniques that we're going to learn, and a million little ones like that wrist, thumb lock, basically is what they're calling it, is kind of the foundation of the handcuffing technique that we're going to learn. Except that you're not going to be doing it to yourself, you're going to be doing it to somebody else, you know, assuming that they are in the right position for you to do that. And so that is the thing that I noticed a lot of people mess up. That is that they either just grab the wrist or they grab the thumb and they don't torque it the right way. Because that's the other thing is you might grab the thumb and just not move it in the right direction, right? You know, and then you're not really getting the maximum benefit of that. And so especially if you find yourself in a situation where your opponent has a size and strength advantage on you, those little things are really important because anybody ever heard of the OODA loop? You know what I'm talking about when I say that? No, I just giving me blank stares. Okay, there is like a colonel in the Air Force a long time ago who was talking about like force on force training. He's talking about this idea basically that we're constantly making decisions in our head, you know, split second decisions about what to do and things. And it's basically just kind of a continuous loop that we're in where we observe something that needs our attention. We orient ourselves to that thing that needs our attention. And then we have to decide very quickly on a course of action and then we act. So that's what the OODA stands for: observe, orient, decide, and act. And so our objective in the law enforcement encounter is going to be, or in a military encounter really, is to try to disrupt that, you know, so that people don't have necessarily the time or the ability to think and react to what you're doing. And so if somebody is, for example, they come in to attack you, right? And they come in and they're going to just throw a punch, and you're able to block that punch. Now they have to do something else, and they, you know, so we're kind of always in this kind of thing when we're in an encounter with people where we're trying to stop what they're doing and take control of the situation. And so whenever we can bring pain compliance into the equation, that's a lot of what that is accomplishing is getting their mind out of the fight, at least for temporary, because their immediate reaction, right, is going to be, ow, that hurts, right? And it's going to distract them from being able to whatever it was they were thinking about before. And it might dissuade them. And so if you can, and that's why another common theme that we'll see when we're watching videos where uses of force weren't effective, a lot of the reason for that sometimes is because the officer didn't actually use force soon enough, if that makes sense. You know, a lot of the criticisms and stuff that are publicly mounted against police is that we're trigger happy or whatever, for lack of a better word. We're always out there, you know, bashing heads or whatever, but in reality, it is more of a problem for you to not engage when you should have, you know, because the more that somebody gets committed to their course of action, right, the more difficult it is to dissuade them. So if you can come in, for example, like when we learn the escort technique, right, there is a certain way that you're going to contort their arm and shoulder that is going to not only make it uncomfortable for them, but also make it difficult for them to turn on you and mount an attack on you. And that sends a message to their brain that number one, they're dealing with somebody that's trained and knows what they're doing. Number two is that, they're going to decide, do I want to resist this? Do I want to fight him? Do I want to run away? Can I get away? And so you're communicating a lot with your actions that is difficult really to verbalize, right? And so the degree to which that you can utilize these techniques, you might avoid fights that you didn't know were coming, in doing that. And so that being said, that's kind of a big, long, rambling way of me saying that technique is important. Technique is what we're going to focus on in this class. We're trying to get it right. You're going to be graded mostly on, as far as grades go, you're going to be graded mostly upon the academic test and not so much on how long it takes you to get there as far as the practices go. Does that make sense? Like if you struggle and it takes you all semester to figure out how to do the shoulder pin restraint or whatever, it's one of the more difficult ones that we learn, you're not getting docked on points because it took you longer than most of the class to figure it out or whatever. If by the end of the class, you can demonstrate that technique effectively within 3 attempts, you're fine. So I'm not trying to be super critical or whatever on grading. This is really about getting the certification. That is really what the class is all about. Most people finish this class with an A, sometimes a B. If they do, I know it's not so great on the test. By the way, the exams are all online on Brightspace. You will have a book. I haven't received it yet. They had an issue with their training, I guess, supply chain control crap, whatever. Within a couple of weeks, we'll have the books, the manuals. That's what the tests are based on. You'll be able to have that in front of you and look it up. So there's really no good reason that you shouldn't be able to do very well on those exams. Mainly just because I'm not trying to say that academic stuff isn't important, but it's not my focus. My focus is on teaching you to do stuff because there's very real world consequences if you don't do this or if you can't do this right. And one of the reasons it's very important to me to focus on the technique is because first time I went through this kind of a class, and then I get into working and I get into an encounter and I just can't get that armbar to work. Like it's just the guy's just looking at me, and I tried twice and then I had to adapt, and so I actually went to our department DT instructor and talked to him about it and figured out that it was just a very subtle thing that I was doing wrong, in how I contorted that arm. Remember, I told you that was important. So I want to focus on that because when you get into, for example, this class has, I think, 13 people enrolled and 11 people here, when you get into like an academy class, learning this, you're going to have like 30 people, and you're not going to necessarily get very much one-on-one attention. And it really kind of depends too on your ability to recognize, I need assistance, I don't think I'm doing this right, or your partner being a good partner and saying, hey, I think you need, to kind of adapt this, because there's a lot of things that look close enough, right? When I'm evaluating people and they're doing the technique, it's hard for me to sometimes recognize whether or not they're actually doing things the correct way, especially if the partner is just kind of going with it and not communicating what they're feeling. So that's the other thing to kind of end on here, is that when you are doing these techniques, somebody else is doing these techniques on you, It's not affecting their grade or their outcome of the class for you to point out or say, I don't think you're doing that quite right. You know, you're not being a jerk. It's actually good that you're pointing that out, because especially early on, you know, if they can figure that out, you know, in the classroom environment, then they don't get their ass kicked by a bad guy, you know, to learn the lesson, you know. So be a good bad guy. If you're the one having the technique demonstrated on you, help them get it right. It's not nitpicky. It's not being a jerk. It is what is expected here. So that being said, we will meet in the gym on Thursday and get this party started.